Well, now we're going to go through residential lease management. The main area in which you can go in and make adjustments, changes, research, all that kind of good stuff is going to be through the residential drop-down, select a resident. Now if you know who you're looking for, you can use any of these boxes in order to search for them, or you can hit search and bring up everybody. Now by everybody in here you can see it says new and current, so that would indicate that my filter has been adjusted for new and current. If you're looking for someone old, co-resident, or other, you're going to want to make that adjustment. Alright, let's go ahead and grab Jennifer's account here. Now within her account, the very first thing that you see is her lease information page. So you can always see the resident ID, starting with the property, building, unit, RM lease ID. A lot of times if you're communicating to support and you want to note the specific unit or family in this unit, this is a great resident ID to use as well. You can see application date, occupancy date, lease term, current lease start date, lease expiration date. Security interest is for security interest properties, so for example Arizona, if we have to pay interest on the security deposit. Deposit required and on hand. You can click on these and get not only the additional deposits, but the security deposit, which is going to be associated as a charge code RNT. But in this example, you can see that there's pet rent as well in here. And then you can also see what's on hand as well. Utility billing, this is where NWP pulls the billing from. If they are not paying any NWP bills, maybe it's an old contract and in the contract it says they don't pay utilities that the property does, but this is where it's pulling that information from. Next one over, you can see who the leasing agent is. Move-in reason, vacate date, vacate reason, transfer from, transfer to, so all the relevant dates in order to kind of view what's going on with the account. You can see alternative invoice address. So let's say that mom and dad pay my utility bill. Mom and dad's address in here, a copy of the NWP bill will be sent to this address. Letters we're not using. Notes, kind of like your file log. Same idea in here is you can actually keep all your notes for that person in here as well. One of the more common ones is going to be resident notes. There's also tenant notes in there, but you can add them in there and it'll save it for you. You probably also saw that there's a bunch of other different types of notes, so delinquency notes. If you sent them a late letter, it can re-record late letter notes. So all different types of common kind associations. Vehicles, if you want to put in your vehicle information, notice there's a character spacing limit in here as well, so if your license plate number is a lot longer or a lot shorter than this character spacing limit, which it most likely is, it could also be an area in which you could go in and put in the license number and then also like a parking tag number or something like that. The reason is this actually pulls to a report called license plate report, so that can be a handy area for that. Next over here you can see how many open service requests, number of late payments, and NSFs. These counters do add up, so every time you NSF a check, it tallies up on this counter here. If we made a mistake with late payments and checks and it's on the counter here, that's something you could always email support and they could reset for you. The NSF one for blocking it after maybe 2 NSFs, if that's how your property's set up, it gives you the option, hey, do you want to block this person? They've had 2 NSFs. After 12 months, that 2 resets. Above it, you can see charge late fees. So this is how MRI knows to pull this to the late fee worksheet and what the formula is. You can see lease history. So if they have multiple leases, you can see them all listed in here. Ledger inquiry. Notice how it's going to pull up the primary resident, so you can see that resident ID. But even though all the residents share this account information, it's always going to default onto the primary resident. Below that, you can see the begin and end period. If you want to go back in time, you can always change this to 01. It'll take you back as far as that ledger goes, or 00, whatever's easier to type. The reason is because we didn't have MRI before then. Include pending prorations. So if somebody goes on notice to vacate and you check that box, you can include those pending prorations. Current balance, ending balance. If they don't match, you probably have an open batch. This is the ledger account. And then this is the security account up here. So two different accounts. You can also see, if we're check scanning, you can actually see images of those checks. They're linked right in the ledgers. Detail, you can either click on this one or you can do it by month. It's up to you. Within there as well, like for example, if I click on the detail tab, I kind of like this one if you want to go through and kind of segregate charges or check numbers or something like that, just kind of consolidate them into the particular interest. So for example, if I go in and I say check 00135, you can see check 00135 in there. And then charge codes. Let's say, for example, rent. Just want to make sure all my rent was charged and see what payments were associated with it. So that's a pretty handy area as well. Okay, back to lease information. You also have your reoccurring charges listed below here. So you can see, for example, pet and rent, frequency, all that kind of stuff. You can do include future charges. You do include all charges. So if there's no changes, this won't adjust. Next over is the Occupants tab. From the Occupants tab, you can see everyone that's in that unit. You can see what their status was. Maybe it's a new resident that I just set up and I'm still working on their background, still pending because I haven't got it back from my screening service. You can also go into their individual accounts, see all their detail information. A lot of these are default categories, so a lot of times it'll default to something like that. So if that's not something you want in there, feel free to change it. You can see contact in case of emergencies, an email. Up here if they're a guarantor. If they have no social and you check no social, basically it's not allowing anything to be typed in there. However, if it is legitimately no social, like a foreign national or a company, if you want to allow them access to resident portal, you're going to have to put in a social. So I would suggest all zeros, and you would just communicate, the last four of your login credentials is going to be all four for the social. And then date of birth, you could either do 1/1/1900 or you could do their date of incorporation, depending on how they want it set up. You can see marketing source, notes, just like we saw on the other page, employment information, and credit. Credit is not a credit on their account, it's their bank account information. So bank name, routing, account number, all that kind of stuff. They could have multiple accounts in here, so you can see multiple bank accounts, which is kind of cool. Because as we know, as part of check scanning, you can have a multiple to one relationship. And then also you have the ability, let's say they bring in their check and they changed accounts and they want to bring it in and let you update it. So this is kind of the area in which you could do that. Now you can remove other residents from here if you have the appropriate paperwork. It's really using that for utility calculations and occupancy limits and stuff like that. But these are other residents. They have no legal or fiduciary responsibility with that apartment. However, you can't move co or current residents. You can only move other. If you need to remove a co-resident or a current resident, You're going to go up to Vacate Occupant, select whomever you're going to vacate, and then the appropriate date. Also, if you choose a current resident, it's going to come up with this message telling you, hey, if you choose a primary resident, you have to choose a new primary resident. Makes sense because everything always has to be tied to one primary. Okay, next one over is notices. So let's say that I'm going to use this process date because we're in training mode. It's the same date, they didn't give me notice, they just moved. Whatever the reason is. We always want to choose a reason, by the way. It's not helpful to have nothing in there because we don't know why they moved, so that's something we definitely want to find out. Also, when you put in this actual vacate date, it's going to give them a system proration back. So it's going to charge them this as part of bill up, and then once they move out, it'll give them this proration back. If this is incorrect, the manual prorations is where you can go in and override the system prorations. Next over is the transfer. So from the transfer, you're going to enter the estimated transfer date, whatever date that might be, what the apartment type is, leasing agent, and then over here, these are default checks, so notes, address, credit their bank account information, and start SOTA. These are not default checked because it's kind of up to management discretion. If you're transferring balances and credits, or if you're transferring security deposits, maybe your apartment flooded and I need to transfer both of these with it. Okay, we'll give that just a second. Also, when you're doing that, since this is part of the new SOTA process, it's going to prompt you to start entering their SOTA information. So if they're moving from one apartment to another, it's pretty easy to go through and enter this as well. So, okay, based on the criteria you entered, it's going to pull up just kind of a list of what options you have. You probably already know which ones you want. If you click on unit or status, it'll bring you to that unit brochure screen. So if you need to drill down and get additional information on this unit, that's where that lives. Whole is really not used very much, but what it's designed to do is remove it from the market, hold on to it for a maximum of 48 hours, but it doesn't count as a lease. And then starts at, this is the one that we really want to use because we want to make sure if we're leasing a unit that day, we're finishing it that day, so it shows up as a lease. You can see in the resident preferences, this is going to be the lease term. If that's incorrect, you can unselect and reselect the one you want. Concessions and rents, if that's different than what's in here, this is where it gets changed. And then concessions obviously as well. Rentable items and other options. Oh, by the way, concessions and rents, obviously we would never change this if we're an LRO property. They would let you know if they want you to change it, but other properties that do adjust their own rents, this is the area in which it's done. Rentable items and other options. So if you need to assign a garage, maybe additional rentable item stuff, all located in here. If I had a pet, it's going to bring the pet with me. Next is the credit screening page. So this is where you can add and subtract people. So yeah, I'm going to require them for a new credit screening. Maybe they're moving to a bigger apartment. We need to requalify them. Maybe they're losing a roommate and they need to get requalified. So all that information can be located in there. As well as the details, if any of the situation changes. Maybe I'm making more now. Maybe my employer changed. Whatever the difference might be, can all be listed in there. And then you can see old unit proration. So it's going to, again, say what the reoccurring charge is going to be, and then that prorated amount that's coming back. So based on that transfer date or that expected transfer date, we're looking at the difference between those two. Again, like most things, if it's incorrect, you can change it. Here's your new unit, so it's going to tell you what the monthly and prorated amounts are based on the new unit. Again, all these categories are editable. You can see below what the non-refundable fee is, refundable fees. Maybe this is wrong. It should be 20, 25, whatever the situation might be, but again, all editable. You can see security info, checks, amounts, same thing as the ledger, and then you can also print the lease too. Also in the lease, it's going to indicate in the top right hand corner what type it is, so transfer lease in this scenario. Okay, once that all looks good, now you can go into finish, and they're going to be set up as a transfer. So that's really the resident lease management portion, and then all the associated tabs and kind of all the stuff that you have at your disposal. The only few last things is you can print profile from here, so if they do an online lease and you need a application, this is a really nice document, and then also any committed leases or leases in progress can be located down here as well. Okay, well that's just wraps everything up with residential lease management. Thank you so much for joining.